guys, how's it going? It's me, Bo, back here on the Film Scene Investigation channel. Thank you so much for checking out this video. In today's review, I'm going to be taking a look at the 1996 Gothic drama, The Craft. Now, I've known about this movie for many years, but only up until recently did I actually sit down and watch it. I actually remember, I have a memory when I was a kid of going into Blockbuster and seeing the poster, seeing all four actresses on the front. And yeah, I mean, as a kid, I was into kind of action films, and this kind of seemed like some sort of, chick flick kind of thing. So yeah, I just kind of disregarded it. The only reason I ended up reviewing this film was that I was reviewing some Neve Campbell films. I saw her filmography, saw The Craft listed, and yeah, just was like, maybe I should, finally sit down and check this out. Just before we get into the review, guys, of course, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. All the support is greatly appreciated. So, The Craft from 1996 was a film that was directed by Andrew Fleming and starred an ensemble cast of actresses including Fairuza Balk and Neve Campbell. Produced on a budget of around about $15 million, this film went on to recoup over $50 million at the box office and over the years has garnered a cult following. As for the plot, the movie focused on the character Sarah, a troubled young woman who was played by actress Robin Tunney. Now, she had a difficult life, and we saw her moving to Los Angeles with her family to begin a new chapter. We saw Sarah's journey as she joined a local Catholic school where she ended up befriending a group of girls who practiced witchcraft. The group were led by the character Nancy, who was played by actress Fairuza Balk, a very moody girl who was full of angst and attitude. The trio were in the process of finding a fourth member to complete their coven and align the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. They saw Sarah as an individual with a problematic past and thought that she would be perfect to join the group. Initially, Sarah was a little bit hesitant. I mean, she wasn't exactly thrilled with the idea of, having friends. I mean, she was an outsider, but she ended up joining, and very quickly, all four girls started bonding and performing these rituals together. Sarah suddenly had friends that she could confide in, something that she didn't expect to have. And with that, the group's powers, together, they grew stronger, and eventually they started delving into some very dark magic. The group started using their new powers for personal gains, such as Bonnie, the character played by Neve Campbell, who ended up using her magic so she could remove her body scars. Similar to Sarah, Bonnie had some major hang-ups about her disfigurement, and through that, we saw her wear a lot of baggy clothing to cover it up. But like I said, she used the magic, these spells, this trickery to remove these scars. And once the scars were gone, suddenly we saw this new personality kind of come out of Bonnie. And she really embraced that transformation. The group also channeled their energies and discovered some newfound skills, such as levitation and hypnosis. The levitation scene in particular was really well done. Seeing the girls completely shocked that their magic actually worked. One minute, Rochelle was laying down on the floor. The next, she was literally floating in the air with all the girls in, shock and disbelief. They just couldn't believe that their witchery had worked. And then, to top it off, you ended up having Bonnie's mum come in and disturb them and see Rochelle suddenly fall down to the ground. And it was a great scene, very memorable, and probably my favorite scene actually in the entire film. While initially it seemed great to have these newfound skills, the girls decided to go deeper and explore further with their witchcraft, which ultimately led to some deadly consequences. Nancy, in particular, started to have this personality change. She started becoming more erratic. Her behavior was kind of unhinged. And with her, she just was hell-bent on gaining more and more power. And there was absolutely no one that was going to get in her way. She was basically transfixed. And, this odd behavior didn't go unnoticed by Sarah, who eventually confronted Nancy about the whole thing. But this was a mistake on Sarah's part, because having openly criticized her in front of everyone, eventually Sarah, once again, became the outcast. Sarah was just concerned for her friend. She knew that Nancy was acting strange and likely was due to all this witchcraft that they had been learning together. Anyway, she wanted to address the problem, and try and sort it out. But Nancy wasn't having any of it. And very quickly, Sarah became public enemy number one. She became the target and had no one else to turn to. Maybe it's just me, but I always got the impression that deep down, Nancy was kind of jealous of Sarah. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe because she had a much more loving kind of family background, her mum and a dad that loved her, whereas Nancy had or came from a very troubled background with some really, horrible kind of, parents. They didn't care about her. And so I guess in some ways, once Sarah had criticized Nancy, it was the perfect opportunity, the perfect excuse to use to then go after Sarah. Now, taking a step back and looking at the overall film, I came to the conclusion that The Craft was clearly a vehicle created by Hollywood to promote paganism to a younger audience. In other words, the movie glamorized such sadistic practices as this trendy lifestyle that would appeal to young adults. Just look at the setting. It couldn't just be a high school. It had to be a Catholic academy, so that's them, the filmmakers, putting a religious slant on the whole thing. The movie targeted a young audience and normalized harmful behaviors, especially aimed at the female demographic. I'm not saying that, we can blame The Craft for the world's problems and stuff like that. No, of course not. All I'm saying is that, like many films, The Craft did contribute, in my opinion, to the slow decline that we see in Western society. Thematically, The Craft explored the importance of identity in a world where you're the outcast. You had all four of these young women oppressed and then coming together and finding their identity through witchcraft. You have to see what the film is doing here, because it's actually the dark paganism rituals that bonded these four women together. But I will say that it was interesting to see how eventually this bond, it turned sour, and it showed how absolute power can corrupt anyone that uses it. Also, with the film being set in a high school, we saw how such a toxic environment can really shape someone's personality, and I did find that quite interesting. Now, while some could dismiss The Craft for being this, throwaway teen movie, whatever, in actual fact, the movie does hold some substance, especially with the lead character, Sarah, having a suicidal past. I thought the filmmakers did a pretty good job, actually, in the sense that they didn't shy away from the hard truths. And we have to remember that with the Sarah character, that abusive side was very much part of her personality. I'm a straight shooter. I tell it like it is. And, some people, don't like that, especially in a world of fakery. But ultimately, I'll give Hollywood credit in the sense that at least they were brave enough to actually address such a controversial hot topic. The only slight criticism I do have is that I don't think the film went far enough in showing how dangerous such behavior can be, as when Sarah ended up revealing to the rest of the girls about her, abusive past, they kind of saw it as this, cool, trendy thing. The reaction they should have been given is of concern and shock for their friend if they're hurting themselves. But yeah, Nancy and Bonnie, they were just like, pretty cool, huh? When it comes to the performances, overall, I thought everyone did a pretty good job. And together, the coven, all 4 actresses, I thought they had some great chemistry. They all had their individual personalities, but the movie gave everyone a chance to shine, and we got to know each character individually, which was really well done. With all that said, I have to say, the craft ultimately was Fairuza Balk's showcasing moment. She was the standout. She was the most memorable character in the entire film, and it really was perfect casting. From her style to her dialogue, Balk really encapsulated this moody, angsty teenager with this really bad attitude. Now, I've seen Fairuza Balk in a number of films over the years, including American History X from 1998, which I've reviewed on this channel. But looking back, she tends to have quite limited roles, kind of a limited screen time. But with The Craft, she got her time to shine, and she didn't disappoint. If you're a fan of her and you haven't seen this one yet, it's a must watch. It really is. I mean, going into it, I wasn't too sure who exactly was the lead, and I guess in some ways it was the Sarah character, but Nancy, Fairuza Balk, she really owned that role. And it also just made me think that, Fairuza Balk, even though she was kind of, small in stature, she really, in my opinion, would have made a great Harley Quinn. So, yeah, it just came to me when I watched the film. I thought, man, she's got the look already, she would have done a great job. As for Neve Campbell, I thought overall she did a pretty good job playing Bonnie, the young woman with the disfigured body. Overall, it was a solid performance from Campbell, but I've seen better from her. I mean, I'm not kind of criticizing her. She was good, but obviously, Scream was a major highlight in her career, and rightly so. And also, I reviewed a movie a few months back called Wild Things from 1998, also starring Kevin Bacon, and she was better in that film too. The actor Skeet Ulrich had a minor role in the film, playing the romantic love interest for Sarah. He was a guy called Chris who pretty much was a douchebag, the kind of quintessential high school type that was just really out to have sex with as many girls as he could find. In some ways, the Chris character was a little bit like the Billy Loomis character from Scream, only a little more goofy. Overall, I thought Ulrich did a pretty good job, but I did prefer him in terms of his look in Scream, with the longer black hair. He kind of looked like a bit of a geek in The Craft. Before we get to dislikes, I also want to mention the movie's soundtrack, which was a really great collection of songs. And yeah, it just perfectly captured that mid-90s gothic vibe. I particularly liked the cover version of the song How Soon Is Now by the Smiths. In the soundtrack, it was covered by a band called Love Spit Love. And, while it, of course, would have been brilliant to have the original recording, I still thought that having this song, I mean, it's such a powerful song in general. Yeah, it was perfect for the craft. There's also a really nice remix of the song Glory Box by the band Portishead. Of course, it would have been great to have the original recording, but this remix, this slowed down version, it perfectly suited what the film was going for. Just overall, a really great soundtrack. And yeah, it's one of those things where you can, listen to that soundtrack individually at any time and just enjoy the, collection of alternative rock songs on it. I should also quickly mention that there were a number of really great visuals throughout this film. It's safe to say that this was a very well-made production. And just from the cinematography, the lighting, the camera movements, it was all to a high standard. In particular, the beach scene I really enjoyed, just from the way everything looked, from this circle of fire. You had all four women, putting their hands up in the air, doing this ritual. I just thought it was great. Really, it just looked like the quintessential gothic mid-90s movie. And so, dislikes for The Craft from 1996. My biggest dislike for the film would have to be the racist subplot that involved the Rochelle character. So the setup to this was that Rochelle was being bullied by this blonde girl, and eventually at some point we saw the girl say this racial slur, which to me kind of came out of nowhere. Eventually, Rochelle would use some witchcraft to get her own back on the bully, but for me it just seemed very, very forced. I understand the whole bullying storyline. I mean, we've seen it so many times, people bully each other. I understand that. But the subtext around the whole skin color, racial slur, to me, it just seemed unnecessary. I would expect to see that kind of stuff in today's cinema, which we do, with the Hollywood DEI quota and, them constantly promoting these progressive ideas. But to see it in a mid-90s film, it kind of caught me off guard. And in some ways, The Craft was ahead of its time, but not in a good way. It's also worth noting that this whole racism subplot wasn't actually in the original script. It was only added in after the actress Rachel True, who went on to play Rochelle, was cast. So, clearly the filmmakers had their own motivations in inserting this racist subplot into a film that didn't need it. Just because they cast a black actress doesn't necessarily mean that they have to automatically insert some racial subtext. It just caught me off guard, and I was just like, wow, man, that's kind of woke, and I'm kind of not into that. I mean, look at the state of Hollywood like it is, but we saw glimpses of it, and it was right there, and it was unnecessary. I mean, look, let me just clarify this. You can have the blonde girl bullying Rochelle and have it all that, but why go to the extreme of adding the racial subtext, other than if you're just trying to, make that trope of, white people are racist, white people are bad, and look at the poor black victim. I mean, we see it so many times, it's done to death, it's ridiculous, it's why Hollywood's in the state it is in. It's in decline. And, as I said, seeing it just caught me off guard, and the downside is there are elements of this film, The Craft, that are indeed progressive and woke. And so, ratings for The Craft from 1996. I'm going to be rating this movie a solid 5.5 out of 10. The Craft from 1996 was a drama that really encapsulated that mid-90s aesthetic. It was a film that explored many themes, such as friendship and identity. And I guess overall, it was actually a lot darker than I expected. As for the script, I can't really praise it, but then I can't really criticize it either. I mean, it was okay, it was what it was, but I guess the stronger aspect of the craft was the visual storytelling. Also, after watching The Craft, I am kind of surprised that there was no initial follow-up. To me, it just seemed like, a perfect excuse for a sequel, as the film was kind of left open-ended. With that said, I do remember the TV show Charmed, which basically was spawned off the back of the success of The Craft. So there was no initial sequel that came out years after, but still, there was some witch-related content that followed. If you've seen The Craft from 1996, then please let me know your thoughts and memories in the comment section below. For all those who haven't, this is a recommendation from me, especially if you're a fan of the mid to late 90s films such as Scream, Halloween H2O, and even films like American Pie and Road Trip. I think if you like that kind of, young adult kind of dramas, then you'll get a kick out of The Craft. And well, that's all from me today, guys. I do hope you've enjoyed this review of The Craft from 1996. Of course, I'll be back next week with another cult movie review. If you like what I do here, please consider subscribing. And of course, take care.